what the Church of Scientology is so afraid of.
This is SPTV.
Hi guys, welcome back to SPTV. Welcome back to my channel, where every single day of the week or day or whatever, we ask ourselves the same exact damn question. What is Scientology so afraid of, you guys? And we are going to be reacting in this segment to an interview done with Lib TV that was actually quite a few years ago with investigative journalist Mark Ebner, I believe is his name. And they're going to talk about John Travolta and homosexuality and Scientology. And I thought, you know, there's been a lot of you guys in the comments that have privately messaged me about what it is like to be gay in Scientology. What is it like to have that experience in there? And what do they do to you? So I thought it would be interesting to react to some of the information that is already available on the public record, so we can truly contextualize what in the hell is literally going on. So let's start.
Danny Masterson, with that 70s show actor, raised in Scientology, blah, 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 whatever. He's another one of these mouthpieces who was interviewed by Paper Magazine. If you guys can find that interview, it's worth looking at for the laughs, because, you know, one thing you said to me, it's a little off topic from Narconon. One thing you said in that interview was, I know a ton of gays in Scientology, because Paul Haggis had left because of Scientology's backing of Proposition 8, you know, and I was like, yeah, you know a lot, but they're not out. You may know gays. There's plenty of them. John Travolta, heterosexual Tom Cruise gets a pass because he's just dastardly in other means and that sort of thing. But, you know, he said that, and I thought to myself, no. You haven't been reading your Scientology books, because Dianetics, the Bible, unalterable Scientology doctrine by...
All right, so let's react right there to what he said so far, you guys. So obviously, this is way before Danny Masterson was ever convicted of what we all know he got convicted for. So yeah, back in the day, he was already making very rude statements. And if anybody Googles that Paper Magazine, he is definitely extremely rude in the magazine, how he speaks about things. And what Mr. Ebner is referring to here, as far as like Danny Masterson telling him that he knows a lot of gays in Scientology. The fact is, you guys, that there is a high percentage of gays that are in Scientology. We were all treated in disgusting ways. You know, we have Liz Ferris, we have Nora Crest, you have myself, you have just so many, you guys, Danny. There's just so many of us that went through that experience, being told that we were disgusting, degraded degenerates. And what Mark Ebner just said here is, you haven't been reading your books, Danny, and he's referring to Dianetics, but that's not the book that this is all about. Dianetics is not the book where L Ron Hubbard makes mentions of homosexuality in the way that Mark Ebner is going to describe. So let's really just correct that record. It is on Science of Survival. That is what my parents, including but not limited to my parents, Debbie Cook, Marty Rathbun, and all of the disgusting people that ran on me being some sort of degenerate when they themselves were doing the unthinkable to kids at scale. So the Science of Survival book, Mark Ebner is going to discuss a little bit more about what degenerate of degenerates L Ron Hubbard pitched in his little book about, how this is the problem with the gays, that we are 1.1. So if that doesn't mean anything to anybody, that's fine, because it shouldn't mean anything. But trust me, internally inside those hotels, if you are labeled a 1.1, and remember, to be labeled, all you got to do is read a book in a hotel room. And then that gives you the certificate pretty much to go around telling people what their emotional state is and being able to literally, kid you not, literally be there assigning conditions to people, like literally as if they were doctors, as if they had any shred of a clue what they were doing. They'll just be labeling people because apparently they do believe that this book that L Ron Hubbard wrote was incredible. Let's see what else Mark Ebner has to talk to us about.
Founder of Scientology, L Ron Hubbard himself, says that homosexuality, along with, and I like he parses it in with bestiality, lesbianism, and all kinds of perversions. He says that
That's his words.
If you're gay, you are 1.1 on the Scientology tone scale. That means you're a degraded being. That means you are a sociopath. In other words, wow.
Since we do love Chat GPT and all, you guys, let's just ask Chat GPT to correct the record here. And this is what it said. Chat GPT, what does L Ron Hubbard say about gays in the book Science of Survival? In the book Science of Survival, written by L Ron Hubbard, there's passages that express his views on homosexuality. Hubbard's writings on this topic are known to be controversial and have been criticized for their derogatory language and stigmatization of homosexuality. In Science of Survival, Hubbard introduced a tone scale that he claimed ranked various emotional states from low to high. He positioned homosexuality at a lower level on the tone scale, 1.1, suggesting that it indicated a lower level of emotional and spiritual development. The language he used to describe homosexuality in these writings has been widely criticized as offensive and discriminatory. It is important to note that these views are considered outdated and are not aligned with a modern understanding and acceptance of diverse sexual orientations. Well, thank you, ChatGPT. Guess where they don't believe that their views are outdated whatsoever? Inside those hotels. Guess who doesn't think that anything that L Ron Hubbard ever pitched in any of his books can be criticized, or you can even have a single shred of a thought opposite from what that clown wrote? Bingo. You guessed it, inside those hotels. So while everyone out there has actually moved on with the times and have understood that there is absolutely no reason to come for people that have a different type of sexuality and it doesn't deserve to be stigmatized, these people in those hotels still 1000% stigmatize homosexuality. Remember, these people are running on whatever in the hell L Ron Hubbard pitched to them. And they purport, because they read that book, they have a thought that is not their own, but yet they seem to have fully endorsed it for themselves. They have become extensions of L Ron Hubbard because they approved of his writings and endorsed what that disgusting indicted felon was pitching. So for all of you who now have access to ChatGPT Scientologist, listen up to the last paragraph, because this one's going to apply specifically to y'all. It's recommended to approach Hubbard's writings with critical thinking and consider the broader context of evolving societal views on sexual orientation. Modern attitudes emphasize inclusivity, acceptance, and respect for all individuals, regardless of their sexual orientation. Well, isn't that great, you guys, that we now have ChatGPT at every single last shred of American human in this country so they can ask their questions and see what AI tells them. See if they can get with the times, since it is the year 2023, last time we checked, right or wrong?
Wow, this is going to be a lot of work to cure you of this. But what's particularly chilling, he finishes his passage in the Scientology Bible by saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, a society that, how does it go? Brian Williams, Fog of War. Wait a minute, I'll get it. A society that tolerates homosexuality and all the attendant perversions, like the ones just mentioned, bestiality and all that, does not deserve to exist. And then people wonder.
Okay, you guys, and here it is from Mike Rinder's blog, who actually wrote a very good blog about Scientology homophobia. And it says, is Scientology homophobic? There has been considerable discussion about this. In today's world, there is no longer socially acceptable to be anti-gay. Scientology's taken steps to attempt to portray itself as tolerant and welcoming of the LGBT community. But similar to Scientology's claims to disconnection, it doesn't exist or simply is a personal choice. The PR smokescreen hides an ugly and unpleasant reality. At its heart, Scientology is very homophobic. Here's the truth as I experienced it growing up in Scientology and then being a senior official in the church for many years. Let's start at the beginning, where all starts in Scientology, with Hubbard's Dianetics, the modern science of mental health. So this is perhaps the first statement by Hubbard about homosexuality. The sexual pervert, and by this term, Dianetics, to be brief, includes any and all forms of deviation in dynamic 2, such as homosexuality, lesbianism, sexual sadism, etc., and all down the catalog of Ellis and Kraft Aberg, is actually quite ill physically. Perversion as an illness has so many different manifestations that it must be spread through the entire gamut of classes from 1 to 5 above. So that's what L Ron Hubbard was first pitching, okay? Talking about how it's a perversion, it's an illness, and it's physically ill. Never mind that L Ron Hubbard, the man who can talk from both sides of his mouth, as much as he's saying that homosexuality is a physical illness, he will also allow self-admitted rapist, self-admitted child, you know exactly what we're talking about, to float away their desires to do this and to find themselves in a very safe environment to discuss in nauseating, disgusting detail admissions of Class A felonies. So let's also contextualize who L Ron Hubbard was as he puts himself there, pitching himself as some sort of expert that has an idea and has some sort of like viewpoint that people should listen to. Because why are we going to be listening to a man who on one side of his mouth decides to label every last homosexual person as physically ill, and on the other side of his mouth will allow for someone to pay money to go inside a hotel room and discuss doing the unthinkable to children? We're talking literal, disgusting, self-admitted Class A felonies to children. Get it? So why are we listening to the viewpoint of a disgusting indicted felon that took it upon himself to pitch his idea, his outdated viewpoint of reality, that now every single last person in these hotels is running with? And let's get to the second part, because this is the part on signs of survival, which is what Mr. Ebner was trying to discuss, which is even worse. The concept of sexual pervert was expanded in the next book, Signs of Survival, where homosexuality was placed on his tone scale at 1-1, covered hostility. Okay, it continues. 1-1 people are the scourge of society according to SOS. And SOS is Science of Survival, Hubbard's second book, where he pitched disgusting derangements. And this is the book's infamous passage, you guys. Pay close attention and let me know in the comments what y'all think about this, little pitch that L Ron Hubbard is going to give you guys. There are two answers for the handling of people from 2.0 down on the tone scale, neither one of which has anything to do with reasoning with them or listening to their justification of their acts. The first is to raise them on the tone scale by uninterpolating some of their theta by one of the three valid processes. Okay, so I know I'm already losing half of you because this man is already dog whistling what he wants to say without really saying it. So let's translate what in the hell he's talking about. So he's saying people from 2.0 down on the tone scale. So that means that anyone who's antagonistic on down, because 2.0 is antagonism on the tone scale, you guys. And notice how antagonism is also the thing that makes anyone go potential trouble source, because according to the narcissist that L Ron Hubbard is molding in his factory of narcissism, what does a narcissist do when he's met with antagonism? Their egos get very, very weak, real quick, right? So L Ron Hubbard was all about protecting his narcissist inside of those hotels and make sure that they knew if anybody came with any sort of antagonism about what they were doing, that was a horrendous person to have around you. So give credit when credit is due, because this pig, L Ron Hubbard, was thinking of everything he needed to say to insulate his proteges so he could keep his fangs deep stuck inside those people. Then the other thing he goes to say is neither one of them has anything to do with reasoning with them or listening to their justifications of their acts. So there you go. L Ron Hubbard, puts himself into like, don't justify why you're doing that. Don't justify why you're doing this. We're not going to listen to you. And that is about the level of compassion and ruthlessness that any child who is gay, as we talked about, Nora growing up like that, Liz Ferris growing up like that, me growing up like that, Danny growing up like that, and countless other kids, my friend Tristan growing up like that, we were all met with this ruthless, don't listen to them because everything is a disgusting justification. So how that applied to me as a child, you guys, just to give you a little juxtaposition, that means that, when my mother found me wearing her high heels in her closet, I was to be locked up for days on end inside one of her sadistic ethics handlings that she was doing on me starting at age 5 or 6 is as early as I remember my mother having her way with me, locking me up, telling me I'm a disgusting person because I'm a boy and how dare I put on her heels. And she would have me write what they call in Scientology, you guys, OWs. So literally, kid you not, a Scientology parent takes it upon themselves to put a, including but not limited to 6-year-old, to write his OWs. This is when I barely knew how to read or write, you guys. I was just finishing first or second grade, and my mother took it upon herself to lock me up and tell me to write every time I was out of valence, because that's how it was being explained to me, that because I was in a boy's body and I had a spirit that was so effed up, that was so disgusting. My spirit, my thetan, was so disgusting and deranged and bad that I deserved to be locked up writing down what I could barely read and write. So let's make sure that's very, very clear, because once again, we were adults in small bodies. It was not an excuse that you were just learning to read and write. My mother couldn't care any less until I didn't write every single time that I went out of valence, is what she called it. I wasn't getting out of that room. I wasn't allowed to do anything. I was to stay there with a piece of paper and a pen and a book from L Ron Hubbard that said how to write overts and withholds. So the intellectual abuse and torture of minors, the systemic, institutionalized, sadistic practice of having a child locked up, having to do something that they clearly have no shred of a clue what in the hell my imbecile parents that decided to take on this pitch of L Ron Hubbard as a great thing to do. There was no shred of common sense, you guys. These people took these writings seriously. They followed it as a recipe. Oh, it says to add 3 cups of sugar and 10 pounds of acid. Okay, great. Let's do it. That's what that was all about. So it's good that we really start contextualizing why these writings of an indicted felon are not just anything. They're not just, oh, it's a religious belief, like believe whatever in the hell you want. If a mother will entitle herself to lock up a child that barely knows how to read and write, and will be telling them that there is absolutely no justification for them putting on some heels, I would love to hear from child services down in Florida, y'all that are supposed to deal with unhinged parents, that are supposed to deal with parents that do not deserve to have access to minors. Because if those parents are going to be locking them up and having this disgusting type of intellectual abuse, well, Florida, you got a ton of problems on your hands, given that your clear water is infested with parents that do this to their kids. And if you don't know, because you've never heard about it, and if you don't know, because the Tampa Bay Times has never written a shred of a critical thing on stuff that is on the simple public record, well, now you know. Now you have us to thank, us that are doing the heavy lifting, because we have to. Because y'all at the Clearwater Police and the Tampa Bay Times won't do it. So let's explain it so that there's no questions, so that there's no doubts, and so no one else can play dumb. Let's carry on. What else does it say? The first is to raise them on the tone scale by uninterpolating some of their theta by any one of the 3 valid processes. So getting them up the tone scale, you guys, means that you're no longer going to be a homosexual, because you were told that 1.1 was a homosexual. Get it? So in order for you to become better, in order for your thetan to be a better thetan, because you're disgusting and deranged and sick, literally physically ill, It talks about how you have to get it uninterpolated. So you have to raise you up the tone scale. So you won't longer be in covert hostility, is what they were telling us we were. At literally starting 5 years old, we were told we were covertly hostile and that was our problem. So now you start to see why in the hell are 5 and 6 year olds being told that they're covertly hostile for playing with Barbies or putting on a pair of heels. If any parent wants to explain if they do the same thing to their kids, if they also lock them up for days on end until they confess every single time they did something like that, until they have it written, time, place, form, and event. And if you don't write it correctly, guess what? Go back and write it correctly. Go reread what L Ron Hubbard wrote. So the intellectual abuse is real AF, and it's really systemic, and it's all institutionalized, you guys, because again, maybe my parents didn't mean to be this deranged, but they were certainly under the influence of this rhetoric. So whatever the rhetoric said is whatever they went with. It continues. The other is to dispose of them quietly and without sorrow. Adders are safe bedmates compared to people on the lower bands on the tone scale. Not all the beauty, nor the handsomeness, nor artificial social value, nor property can atone for the vicious damage such people do to sane men and women. The sudden and abrupt deletion of all individuals occupying the lower bands on the tone scale from the social order would result in an almost instant rise in the cultural tone and would interrupt the dwindling spiral into which any society may have entered. Imagine that, you guys. Literally, L Ron Hubbard a la Adolf Hitler is generalizing false labeling, putting everyone under the same umbrella. So let's hear from Monique Yingling. Start typing some emails and start explaining how in the hell this is a religious philosophy, Monique. That's what we need to hear from you, since you were the one that didn't do a shred of due diligence before you pitched this indicted felon to the IRS as a religious American bred god. Start typing in your email what kind of pitch you could come up with that explains this disgusting derangement that's being pitched to parents. Parents that are entitling themselves to talk to their kids like this, dispose of them quietly. And just so you guys understand how disgusting it is, our parents were reading us these books. My mother sat with me in the living room telling me I was an adder. More dangerous than an adder. I was 5, 6 years old because I wore heels, because I didn't know anything, because I was just a fucking child. So we're calling out all these parents that are buying these false pitches from this indicted felon. And if y'all want to, justify why it is okay for you in this year 2023 to still be taking this unhinged, outdated rhetoric as something that whatever it is that you say you have the right to do in this United States, it would be very interesting to hear how you pitch your dysfunction to us today. We would love to hear from you right now. Start writing your overts and your withholds on how y'all, as a collective of adults, have treated gay kids. Let's start with that before we even get to John Travolta, because he's a full-grown man. So whatever in the hell John Travolta is agreeing to do in that hotel for himself, we're going to analyze and we're going to give our opinion, but we're not here to rescue him. He's a full-grown adult. He can make a decision. He's got the ability to consent, unlike most of us that couldn't consent to being read this disgusting, abominable, Adolf Hitler-like pitch from the felon that America decided was an American god. I mean, imagine that, you guys. Just disgusting. So it continues. It is not necessary to produce a world of clears in order to have a reasonable and worthwhile social order. It is only necessary to delete those individuals. To delete. You guys get it? Delete. What did Adolf Hitler do with all the Jews? He wanted to delete them, eradicate them. He decided every last Jew person was not good enough to have around. He wanted to raise the society by deleting humans. So America, if you want to say that you are not fully endorsing and sponsoring this state-sponsored disgusting abuse, it'd be very nice for you to call up Monique, and both of you can write how in the Constitution it says that, yeah, America's all about giving a felon like L Ron Hubbard, just room to write whatever he wants. I mean, the New York Times will come around and make it a bestseller. Right, New York Times? Google that. Well, look what we just found, you guys. With 19 New York Times bestsellers and more than 350 million copies of his works in circulation, L. Ron Hubbard is among the most enduring and widely read authors of our time. Isn't that interesting, you guys? Then, too, of course, there's all L. Ron Hubbard represents as the founder of Dianetics and Scientology, and thus the only major religion born in the 20th century. Well, shout out to you, IRS, that had a major part in being the sperm donor to have allowed this disgusting degenerate to breed a religion in the 20th century. Shout out to you, editorial board of the New York Times, that put this man with this disgusting, unhinged rhetoric where nothing has been retracted, nothing has been investigated, and nothing has been done whatsoever. So shout out to the entire editorial board of the New York Times, who couldn't be more useless or pathetic if they tried. I mean, with my little education of 7th grade and reading this rhetoric as we speak in this year 2023, it isn't a rocket genius that can connect the dots between deleting humans and where else was that done? And what other country was it that America supposedly went to rescue and fight the Nazis? And again, America talking from both sides of its mouth. Let's go fight the Nazis, but let's make L. Ron Hubbard a religious American bred god, because that would be a great idea, right, IRS commissioner? Right or wrong? Please, by all means, explain yourselves. While as such, he presents the culmination of science and spiritual technology as embodied in the religion of Scientology. So there you go, New York Times. That's a question to you, please, since you've already put this man 19 times on your New York Times bestseller. Please advise. on exactly what type of science is being pitched in these books and what type of responsibility your editorial board holds over endorsing and awarding 19 times what we can only say is a degenerate felon that y'all seem to be completely goo-goo gaga with. So shout out to the New York Times editorial board, you guys. Write us a letter and tell us what in the hell you guys are talking about and how come in this year 2023 you've done literally shit to fix anything. All right, let's go back to this, you guys, so we can really finish this disgusting thing we're reading. Okay, it continues. It is not necessary to produce a world of clears in order to have a reasonable and worthwhile social order. It is only necessary to delete those individuals who range from 2.0 down, either by processing them enough to get their amount of processing them enough to get their tone level above 2.0 line, a task which indeed is not very great, since the amount of processing in many cases might be under 50 hours, although it might also be another in excess of 200, or simply quarantining them from the society. A Venezuelan dictator once decided to stop leprosy. He saw that most lepers in his country were also beggars. By the simple expedient of collecting and destroying all the beggars in Venezuela, an end was put to leprosy in that country. So again, shout out to you, New York Times editorial board, that put this man 19 times as a bestseller in y'all's pathetic New York Times bestseller books, whatever. It continues, you guys. Another publication that Mike Rinder is talking to us here about is this one. Handbook for Pre-Clears. Homosexuality comes from this manifestation and from the manifestation of life continuation for others. A boy whose mother is dominant will try to continue her life from any failure she has. A girl whose father is dominant will try to continue his life from any failure he has. The mother or the father were cause in the child's eyes. The child elected himself a successor to cause. Break this life continuum concept by running sympathy and grief for the dominant parent, and then run off the desires to be an effect and their failures, and the homosexual is rehabilitated. Homosexuality is about 1-1 on the tone scale. So is general promiscuity. So really contextualizes so many more things that we need to. For many years, Scientology made little or no attempt to defend these fundamental beliefs because they were not really an issue. But over the last 2 decades, there's been a lot more pressure to accept homosexuality and afford gay people the same rights as everyone else. Well, we couldn't agree with you more, Mike. Scientology and Scientologists have taught to change their image on the subject to appear to be gay-friendly. They will try to explain that it's natural that Hubbard put gays on the 1.1 ban, as back in the 50s they could not be overtly gay. They had to be covert and hide their identities, and thus were covert, but does not actually explain the entire concept of 1.1, which is covert hostility and sexual perversion, rape, child molesting, and other things. Homosexuality was labeled a 1.1 trait, not because they were hiding, but because they were perverts engaged in sex for other reasons than procreation. Nor does it explain why these statements have not been removed from the books like some of the other things. There are plenty more references to homosexuality in the scripture of Scientology. HUB 25 February 1960, the model session. To get the PC over any condition or aberration that he's agonizing to get rid of, find a terminal that adds up to it and run single confront on that terminal. Example, if the PC's sick, the process would be, what about a sick person could you confront? If the person is homo, is what about a homosexual could you confront? Then you have, of course, the infamous and still very much used Joburg Sec Check, including all the questions about sexual activities to give flavor of where homosexuality was placed in the pantheon of bad sex acts. HUB 7 April 1961, Johannesburg Confessional. Have you ever raped anyone? Have you ever been involved in an abortion? Have you assisted in any abortion? Have you ever committed adultery? Have you ever practiced homosexuality? Have you ever had intercourse with a member of your family? Have you ever been sexually unfaithful? Have you ever practiced sodomy? Have you ever consistently made practice of sexual perversion? Have you ever slept with a member of a race of another color? Oh yeah, you guys, it's not just homophobic. It's also full-blown discriminatory. This disgusting degenerate that America pitched as a religious whatever the hell is exactly this. So I think America has a lot of explanations to start typing. Here's another one. And the same with a standardized sec check that was published a decade later. HUB 24 December 1972, the Basic Integrity List. Have you ever raped anyone? Have you ever been involved in an abortion? Have you ever committed adultery? Have you ever practiced homosexuality? Have you ever had intercourse with a member of your family? Have you ever been sexually unfaithful? Have you ever made practice of sexual perversion? Hubbard never changed his attitude towards homosexuality. Homosexuals were depicted as degenerate perverts in his last fiction writing, Mission Earth. His attitude about sex in general became even more stringent and bizarre in virtually the last HUB, 27 August 1982. He wrote for Scientologists, which is entitled Pain and Sex. The writing is not presented as figurative. It is intended to be taken literally. And it's based on L Ron Hubbard's vast knowledge of all things, right? Like the total idiot that he was. Destructive creatures who do not want people big or reaching, since they are terrified of punishment due to their crimes, invented pain and sex to shrink people and cut their alertness, knowingness, power, and reach. Thus, you see, much people are experiencing either pain or sex, introverted and not producing much. Pain and sex were the invented tools of degradation. There you go, guys. From L Ron Hubbard, the American bred God, telling us that pain and sex were the invented tools of degradation. Believe it or not, a being can be so overwhelmed by either that he or she becomes an addict of it. Priests become flagellants and cut themselves to pieces with self-whipping. So there's L Ron Hubbard attacking, another religious order, because they're just all about this, right? Torturers drool over pain. Torturers drool over pain. Lovers are very seldom happy. Shout out to you, L Ron Hubbard, who, legend has it that you were literally doing all manner of disgusting things with all manner of women back in the day. How many lovers did L Ron Hubbard take, you guys? How many disgusting relationships did that man have that's already on the public record? It's unbelievable. People do the most irrational things when overcharged with sex, and prostitutes use it as a knowing stock in trade. Combined pain and sex make up the insane Jack the Ripper, who killed only prostitutes, and the whole strange body of sex, murder freaks, including Hickley and the devotees of late-night horror movies. Well, shout out to y'all out there who might be devotees of horror movies, because according to L Ron Hubbard, you are just like a Jack the Ripper type person that's, all about the degraded tools of sex. Under the false data of the psychs, going back to psychiatrists, L Ron Hubbard's made up enemy so that no one could go to a mandated reporter, both pain and sex are gaining ground in this society. Gaining ground in this society, as if pain and sex have not been around all along, you guys. I mean, for somebody that purports to know all about the universe, he really makes some ridiculous, dumb points. Sex is what humans have been having since they were literally here on Earth. Otherwise, how is anyone going to have a baby? Right or wrong, L Ron Hubbard? Please, your shit is like so stupid. Go into an asylum or prison and look at the increasing institutional population and know that you are looking at, in the main, there are pain and sex addicts, decadent and degraded, and no longer capable. I mean, this is literally what L Ron Hubbard says. Let's finish this. You probably recall the church's support of Proposition 8 in California was beginning with the end of Paul Haggis and Scientology. That in turn led to a piece in the New Yorker, and thanks to Tommy Davis, deft handling of the matter, to a book by Lawrence Wright, and from there the film Going Clear. Paul Haggis discusses these events in a film, but is far more detailed in the original Lawrence Wright piece of the New Yorker. It was all about his disgust that the church was supporting the proposition discriminated against gays. But what about what goes on behind the facade of the church presenting outside to the world? Here, to borrow the favorite expression of an old friend, the cheese becomes more binding. You are not qualified to join the Sea Org if you are gay, period. You're not qualified to join the Sea Org if you have an extensive history of homosexual acts, even if you claim you're not gay. In fact, this is so well known that people have blown off Sea Org recruiters by claiming they are gay. They are dropped like hot potatoes. Actually, they are dropped if they have gay thoughts. So I think it's important to contextualize what in the literal hell this rhetoric is all about, because it's not just nothing, you guys. And it's not just like, like some, I can think this, you can think that, we can all think different things. We're talking about what are children that are gay, that manifest that. What are they going to be subjected to if parents are going to buy the pitch that you guys just heard from this indicted American felon? What is that going to do to those kids? What are they going to suffer? And where are the parents in all of this? What is their responsibility for literally, I mean, as much as L Ron Hubbard makes a whole song and dance about tortures, how are these parents going to make a case for themselves that they were not into torturing kids, their own kids, that were not sadists themselves? In what world would you as a parent enjoy doing this to your kid? What kind of mother does this to their child? That'd be a very good question for my own mother to figure out. So shout out to you, Sandra Gill.
You take that in, and then people wonder why I call Scientology a fascist organization, a criminal mind control cult.
I mean, there is seriously, we know that the Nazis have felt that same way about homosexuals, and that they were imprisoned and killed because of their sexuality. I don't know. We're not saying that he goes as far, but he certainly.
No, we are saying that he goes as far, Allison. He goes as far, and they actually implemented that internally, because as much as Mike Rinder just said that there are no gays accepted into the Sea Org. There were plenty of gays inside the Sea Org. We were there. We were being tortured. We were being abused. And they did allow people that were gay in the Sea Org. Half the people that were kids didn't understand their sexuality yet. Again, because these people adulticize you and ask you all these disgusting, inappropriate questions to see if you qualify for this and qualify for that, purporting that they're so elite and they just want the best of the best. You know, but those questions were in the life history. Those questions we were asked before anything. As a 12-year-old, I was already being asked these questions. And of course, we were not admitting that we were, because admitting to it would only get you in more trouble. But they would still be asking you all manner of other questions to dig in and to find out. Just ask Marty Rathbun the type of questions he was asking me when he was doing his little ethics interviews. When Marty Rathbun was having his little freak on with me as a minor, ask him what kind of gay questions he was interested in knowing about in that ethics interview, and how long he kept me there interrogating me about my gayness as a minor, because he really needed to know. Let's really find out about that. And before you say, Allison, that they didn't take it that far, ask Debbie Cook how many people that were gay disappeared to her concentration camp, the hole she ran for decades that she was there as the captain FSO. Ask her how many gays she disappeared into a concentration camp-like facility called the RPF. Debbie Cook's version of the hole. The one that L Ron Hubbard told her to be all about. It doesn't matter. L Ron Hubbard was the person that these people were sycophants of. So they literally pretend that anything that man wrote in a memo is a fact and is something that, yeah, should be very endorsed with zero critical thinking skills. You really have to get that through your head. These people in there are, like Mike Rinder already said, taking everything literally. Nothing is figurative. Nothing is, well, you know, but yeah, that was written in the 50s. You get in trouble. It's called a technical degrade. If you say that, but that was written in the 60s, we did move on from, oh, you're technically degrading L Ron Hubbard? How dare you? That's how serious these people are. And that's how deranged and disgusting and psychopathic they become. FYI.
Identifies it as aberrant, and so is there a program in Scientology to cure people of, I mean, is that part of going clear, to get rid of your homosexuality?
No. Going clear has nothing to do with getting rid of your homosexuality. The only thing that can so-called address it in the most intense of ways is the false purpose rundown on the second dynamic. That's what L Ron Hubbard says. Process those people, get them up the tone scale. If you interrogate them ad nauseum, they will soon come up the tone scale and not be who they are. They'll become this other version of themselves that we need them to be in order for them to be okay, in order for them to still stay inside the hotel, because everyone in those hotels are extremely homophobic. And a grown man like John Travolta having a homosexual past, it would come up in his audits all the time. Every last time that John Travolta got a massage from a masseuse, a male masseuse, that would be found out in his audits. But let's not forget that John Travolta is paying as an adult for those audits. So before he goes boo-hoo, waha, like they did this to me, he needs to check with himself in the mirror and see how much money did he transfer from his bank account to go get degraded, humiliated, and trampled on, because apparently he's also into that. John Travolta, he pays for that type of humiliation and control. He loves it, cannot get enough of it. There's plenty of public record interviews where he states that this is the best thing that happened to him, and he wouldn't even know where he would be if it wasn't for Scientology. So many things can be true at once, you guys. But do not get it twisted. He's getting interrogated. He's being forced to discuss in detail every last thing he did homosexually. We just saw the questions. They don't leave anything to the imagination. They ask about this and they want to know that. They ask about that and they want to know that. And remember, whoever is ministering it, to borrow Monique Yingling's words, on the public record, will have their head chopped off if they miss a withhold on John Travolta. So let's not forget that either.
No, basically what I believe the way they handle it is that they'll, like for instance, in the case of what I believe to be John Travolta is, you may hang out in bathhouses and get massages and turn your ass cheek up and, try and solicit extracurricular stuff from your masseuse. You may be, making out with your lover. You may have a guy who claimed you were his lover going back 20 years, all that stuff. But
they're coming to get you. Yeah.
This is a Scientology term. Mock up your own reality. In other words, yeah, you're gay, but you're not gay. It's one of those things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in other words,
I mean, and I get it, guys. Like, if you weren't there in that culture, it's very hard to be an outsider trying to decipher. And yes, you can mock up, and that's a word that is used there, but nobody tells you to mock up not being gay. Nobody tells you that at all. And the reality is not the reality and all of that. It's very simple. If John Travolta has a withhold, he's told that Scientology technology will stop working on him. And a withhold is anything you don't want known. So there is no shred of privacy between you and your dom, the auditor. The auditor needs to know everything about you, or else they will get their head chopped off for missing withholds. If you don't have that level of commitment of your sub, your PC, then you are getting your head chopped off. That's how it works. It's a straightforward way of how this works. So, celebrity or not, John Travolta is not allowed to have a single shred of a withhold. No Scientologist is, because L Ron Hubbard wrote it in his memos that the minute somebody keeps a single withhold from them, his ridiculous technology starts literally dissolving. Will stop working, nothing will work, the gains will be lost, and they're not going to want to be Scientologists anymore. That's how petrified L Ron Hubbard was of his proteges coming to their senses and gaining their own sense of authority over their lives instead of being subservient and enslaved by some disgusting science fiction degenerate felon writer.
Sublimate.
Kelly Preston, here's your wife. She's not gay either. Gay, not gay, not gay, not gay, not gay. You're not gay. Mock it up. Fake it. You know what I mean? So in other words, that puts these people even deeper into a closet. You see what I'm saying? Again, there's another crime against just humanity. The idea that the only way to get you through this and keep you as the gravy train for Scientology is to have you live your life deeper and deeper and deeper in denial.
Well,
it's sad. I mean,
it is very sad, you guys, but one thing that cannot be trivialized is that John Travolta is paying for all of these services. John Travolta can break away from this. As much as everyone tries to say that he cannot and nothing can be done, every grown adult that became part of this can walk away from it, just like we did. What is their excuse to not walk away? What are they losing? What are they really losing? And what have they been actually gaining as celebrities, having this type of disgusting dysfunction impregnate every last shred of their privacy and their lives? I mean, we're not saying that it's not hard to disentangle yourself from such disgusting, toxic relationships, but our concern is that John Travolta exposed his special needs son, Jet, to this, and he's also exposed his daughter, Ella, to this. As a very young kid, she was already being audited. As a very young kid, she was already being subjected to audits, to sec checks, to auditors that were asking her the disgusting questions that Mike Rinder just posted up in his blog. If Ella finished grade 2, she would have had to be given a Joburg. I was given that Joburg as a minor. I was asked if I've ever raped anyone, if I've ever practiced sodomy as a 12-year-old. My parents were all okay with it. They told me I was an adult in a small body. So there was no reason to complain. What the hell are you complaining about? You're so lucky to be getting questioned like this. You should be so lucky and so grateful that this is being done. So let's just contextualize that part, because while the adults and the parents want to play victim, the enablers are not the victims. Their kids are the victims. The enablers of the abuse are the ones that are getting scammed by these hotel executives. But that's between adults and adults. So there's two things here, two buckets, adults and adults, children of adults getting triangulated into this disgusting, unhinged derangement that goes on day in and day out.
Easy to mock Travolta. It's easy to just, it's plenty easy to do this kind of thing. But the point is that they're doing this on rank and file human beings, and destroying their lives. And that's, why, I'll step up anytime.
And yeah, rank and file normal human beings that were grown adults that love it. I mean, just go ask every single last person that is inside those hotels if they don't love it, if they're not getting something out of being in those hotels. Because the ones that haven't made it out, there's still something in it that they're getting for themselves. So don't pretend that no one gets nothing out of being there. And you cannot go around telling every last shred of an adult what to do with their time, what to do with their body. But you can tell them that they cannot do that to their children. Let's make sure that's very, very clear. That's the only thing you could possibly have to tell an adult that they have to listen to. If you know that they're abusing their kids, they need to be told. They don't need to be cradled. They don't need to be canoodled. They don't need a corporate media that doesn't understand how to call out the dysfunction for who the victims are. Because again, this is a burning hotel building. The adults got themselves a ticket. They brought their kids with them. No one in those hotels that are burning with sadists that like being sadistic, a la Debbie Cook, Marty Rathbun, ask all these executives that were all about screaming, yelling, torturing kids, torturing seniors, torturing, literally, like the dysfunction inside those hotels cannot be explained. If you weren't there, you don't know. You cannot know. And none of these investigative reporters have been able to really step foot inside those hotels or experience the culture for themselves. Because apparently in journalism, infiltrating a hotel where there's state-sponsored child trafficking of minors at scale has not been the priority of a shred of an American journalist in all of the United States. We're still waiting for someone that has the balls to go see it for yourselves so you can report on your own experiences instead of relying on the trauma inflicted, including to, but not limited to, the minors that had to withstand years of dysfunction without having a shred of a clue what in the hell these adults were talking about. So they pitched their derangement and they made us their pawns. Kids didn't have a shred of an ability to become a pawn, to become a slave. We didn't want to do that. And we could have never understood the level of betrayal that was on the table, the type of Class A felonies that were going to be perpetrated on us by signing a sham, disgusting bullshit contract with Debbie Cook's hotel for 1 billion years. So let's make sure that's very clear. Because while everybody wants to go and save every last shred of an adult, you cannot save someone that doesn't want to save themselves. That's called being an adult. That's called adulting. If someone's a drunk, you might want to get them off the alcohol. You might want to really help them. But if they don't want to help themselves and they overdose on their alcoholic abuse, there's nothing that an adult can do to prevent another adult from harming themselves. The only thing you could possibly do is help the kids if they are in that environment of that drunk person, and hopefully they can have a normal life away from that dysfunction, away from that derangement. So that point needs to be made again in this whole gay conversation. You know, even a gay grown man can go into a Scientology building if they want to. If they consent to everything, if they like it that extreme, who is going to stop him? The police? The police is really going to go and say, oh, no, don't go in there. You know, you might not like it in there. It's called an adult.
I'm out on this BS.
This reporter, you guys, you know, try to come swinging. But the problem is, if you are not an expert, if you haven't really investigated a subject, then you cannot cover the subject. It's like asking a bookkeeper to do advanced CPA work. It just doesn't work that way. You need to understand what you're covering. You need to have eyeballs in the culture. Otherwise, this is all we get. All these people that have an opinion because they heard someone say that this is what they do, and they kind of read it in a book, but the book didn't make sense because they don't understand the language that was being used by L Ron Hubbard to dog whistle. I mean, we even covered, even the New York Times has not a shred of a clue of what in the hell they're endorsed 19 times with a New York Times bestseller. So that's what we have to say about John Travolta. If John Travolta doesn't like it there, he can get himself out. He's addicted to them. No one can come and save you when you are addicted as an adult. And yeah, no one can do an intervention on him either because he's insulated AF. And he doesn't want to be told he's wrong. And he doesn't want to be told that he's been wrong his whole life. And he doesn't want to be told that whatever rhetoric he was reading for himself in those books from L Ron Hubbard was harming his children. Because he wants to tell himself, like every last parent that put themselves in the position to expose and subject their kids to the unthinkable, disgusting things written by L Ron Hubbard, they don't want to do that type of reckoning. They don't want to admit it for themselves. My own mother doesn't want to admit this to herself. My own mother rather project on me that I'm the problem and I was always the problem and I'm just such a suppressive and I'm so this and so that, and whatever label she can find to make it okay to have sadistically abused me as a child. So that's what all the Scientology parents have to reckon with. What in the hell did y'all do individually in this wide-ranging criminal racketeering conspiracy that you all have been pawns of, if not full-blown criminal co-conspirators, enablers, funding this abuse of minors at scale? When John Travolta was around paying for his services, guess who was there to deliver services for his, including but not limited to his staff? That trainer he brought around that I was told that I needed to be his supervisor on tiers and objectives, that I was told I needed to help him get rid of his chewing tobacco addiction because the guy was baseball or whatever, and he kept putting chewing tobacco all over his gums. And he was always like a nervous wreck, and, you know, unthinkable things happen that I don't even want to get into right now. But that is just to contextualize John Travolta and the choices that man has done as a full-grown man. I thank you guys for watching. I thank you for listening. And I will see you all very, 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 very soon. Bye-bye.